Hey everybody, Tall Family Films here. Today we're going to replace the front struts on an SUV. This process would be the same for a lot of cars. This one happens to be a 2012 Acura MDX. So we start by removing the sway bar end link. And notice that it's stuck. After I remove the nut, it won't come out. And that's because the knuckle needs to either come up or the car needs to come down, one or the other, so that the pressure comes off of that bolt. So I'm going to take a jack here and I'm just going to raise up the knuckle, the entire wheel assembly, if you will, and that will alleviate some of the pressure. So make sure that when you're jacking this up that you're on a solid surface, that you're jacking, on the actual knuckle, that you're not going to damage something with the jack. So it just falls right out when you take the pressure off, see? All right, so nice and easy. All right, so now we move on to removing the hydraulic brake hose that is attached to the right side. And there's only one other cable that's attached. It's the ABS, and so we'll remove that next. Makes it easier if you have a power ratchet. I mean, if you're working on cars any 2 or 3 times a year, then maybe this isn't necessary, but any bit more than that, this is really a big time saver. All right, so there's a plate that holds the ABS cable, and when you remove this bolt, the whole plate and the cable will come loose with it. So don't lose the bolt. Okay, so next we're going to go after the strut bolts. There's 2 of them. They are both 24 millimeter. So get a 24 millimeter socket. You can do this with a breaker bar. If you have an impact tool like I'm using here, it'll make the job a lot easier. They're on there pretty well, but a breaker bar would have no problem with this, and you have pretty good access to get to it as well. So I'm loosening up the nuts on each side, and after I do that, then I have to go from the other side in order to remove the bolts out so that you're not going to hold the nut when I do it. So looking at it from this side, you'll get a better angle to see what I'm doing here. So hitting the gun, everything's just spinning, so if I can just hold the nut, then if I can hold the bolt, then I can just remove the nut. All right, so all we're doing here is just speeding up, getting all of the nuts off, and you can see the whole knuckle relaxes when I've pulled the bolts off of both sides. All right, so I'm putting the jack here so that the entire knuckle doesn't flop forward when I remove these bolts. So what I'm using here is a socket extension and a hammer just to tap the bolts back through. Don't mess up the threads. And the entire knuckle is now loose, and the jack, like I said, is preventing it from flopping, and that would put too much pressure on the axle, and we're going to see a surprise about that coming up. But in the meantime, let me zoom in here and show you what I'm talking about when I say the axle. So this rubber boot is going to come into focus right here. Okay, you don't want to put too much pressure on this. You don't want to pull too hard on the axle. There are 2 things that can happen, and neither are good. The first is you can separate the axle inside the boot. That's actually pretty easy to recover from. So in that case, you would just manipulate and move the lugs back and forth on the outside of the wheel, and you'd be able to pop it back in. It's not fun, but it actually will go back in. I don't want to ruin the surprise, so we're going to save the other problem for later. All right, so we need to make sure that this boot on the outer side of the axle doesn't get damaged. It is rubber. This is the strut is steel. When it drops down on it, it could cut a hole in it. That's not good for a rubber boot. So put a rag there to prevent that from happening. And now let's go up top and remove the bolts that are now the only thing holding the strut in. There's 3 of them, and there's 3 plastic plates there we have to remove. Pretty easy too. They have a little notch in them showing you where to put a flat blade screwdriver to get access to the bolts that are underneath. So you'll need a short socket extension and a deep socket. The bolts that are down in here are a lot longer than a standard socket would be able to accommodate. So the strut's really loose right now, as you can see, but we don't want it to just fall down on everything either. So this is kind of a balancing act between removing the bolts up top, the nuts up top, and holding on to the strut down at the bottom. But wiggling it out, you can get it to fully remove itself. Then you want to compare it against the new part that you have. And my parts appear to be identical. Both of them have the ABS and the brake sensor, the brake line holder. So that looks perfect. I see the sway bar end link holes are here. And we'll take a look at the top. They appear to be identical as well. Your new strut should have a sticker over this bolt right here, this nut. Do not remove that nut. All of the pressure of that spring is held under there. So one of the questions you may have is there a proper orientation for the bolts at the top? And the answer is no, because you can spin the bottom around. So no matter how you put it in, you'll be able to adjust it at the bottom. So getting in here is certainly no joy. And you're going to get to see what happens if, I told you there's two problems with you pulling on the knuckle too hard. And here's what happens if you pull too hard.
Oh, crap.
If you're wondering what that sucking sound was, it was the axle boot actually separating itself from the axle. So that created another problem for me that's not part of this video. I had to replace the axle. It can be repaired, but I tried and it was much more difficult to repair than it was to replace. So, but hey, when the knuckle was that loose, it sure was easy getting the strut in place. So I went ahead and finished up the job and tightened the bolts at the top. There was really nothing to worry about at the bottom right now. Didn't have to worry about cutting the boot or any of those associated things. If you're wondering, replacing the axle actually only took about 45 minutes and it cost $100. So for all the mistakes I could have made, that one wasn't so bad. Remember that you want to put Loctite or a thread locker on all of the bolts that you took off for this entire operation. The strut bolts, you want to put them on, you put thread locker at the top as well on those 3 bolts. You want to put thread locker on the sway bar end link. Anything that is associated with this actual suspension or brakes, if you get into that as well. So don't forget to attach the ABS line and the brake line. Get those put back on. Sway bar end link, just like we had to adjust the height in order to get the sway bar end link off, we got to adjust the height now. Raise something up, or let something down in order to get them to line up. So what I'm doing here is I used a jack stand, and so I raised it up to put the jack stand in, and then I lowered it back down so the jack stand kind of holds the frame in place, lets me line these 2 up, and then it's really easy, it just falls right in place. Put a little thread locker on and tighten it down, and that's the whole job. So if this video helped you, you could really help me by subscribing to my channel and giving it a thumbs up. It really helps me a lot. Thank you very much.